So basically, aluminium space frame chassis, real leather direct from a cow, hand stitched of course, adjustable driving position, optional cup holder, beautiful.
Very nice.
Jonathan and I both love cars that are fun to drive, but as you might have noticed, sports cars are kind of off the menu for the next, well, 20 years?
Afraid so. Things like cargo space, safety, comfort, convenience are now more important than ever. But since we're driving enthusiasts, we don't want our vehicles to be boring either.
Which brings us neatly to the new Chevy Blazer and the Honda Passport. Both promise lots of real-world practicality with something a little extra, a bit of flair.
But which one's better? To find that out, we're doing a proper family test. We're bolting in car seats, we're loading them up with cargo in the back, and seeing how much comfort they provide out on the open road.
Then we're going to take them to the Edmunds test track and find out how much fun we can have when the kids aren't in tow.
But before we get started, be sure to click subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, or if you just like babies.
And head to edmunds.com for the best prices on both these vehicles. Yeah, sure, you've got to let your kids develop their own personality. You don't want to influence them too much, that'd be wrong.
Is that a Porsche race suit?
Yeah, of course. Check this out. Look at that. So when you've got a screaming kid, I think every parent knows that speed is of the essence. So we're going to have a good old-fashioned race. Who can fit their child seat faster?
I'm down for that. Done.
Victoire!
So how's the seat install go?
To be honest, it is pretty easy. This has got a latch system, but it only has two, one at either side. So if you're a middle passenger, you have a really bum deal.
And that's the thing I kind of like about the Passport. There are actually 3 sets of anchors back there. So if you want, you can have the middle car seat installed in the center. You can have 2 adults on either side, which is actually kind of rare for this class.
And even if you're traveling alone, it's kind of nice just to be able to turn around and tent the little one. I like that.
Yeah, me too.
The other thing that I find in all these cars, I'm 6'4", and you've got to be really careful. It's almost like the smaller your baby, the bigger the car seat. In a lot of vehicles, I really struggle to drive with the seat behind me. The Blazer's actually not too bad for that. I have to compromise a little bit, so I'm a little bit cramped, but it's generally okay. The Passport has perhaps marginally more room, but to be honest, there's not much in it. And that is sensible consumer advice.
The Passport's essentially a shortened version of Honda's 3-row SUV, the Pilot, but it has more space and more than double the towing capacity of the popular compact CR-V. It sports a more rugged design with added ground clearance for improved driving when you're off the beaten path. Under the hood is a smooth revving V6 engine, which makes a healthy 280 horsepower. There's also a pretty sophisticated all-wheel drive system available, which our test car happens to have. To some, the Passport may not have the most striking exterior design, but that also poses a lower risk of polarizing shoppers.
The Blazer sits between the Equinox and the Traverse in Chevy's lineup, but it's much more ambitious than its sensible siblings. Chevy's tried to infuse the Blazer with the style and the spirit of the Camaro Coupe in order to appeal to a different kind of customer. Now, normally bolting sports car styling onto the body of an SUV is a recipe for disaster, just ask Porsche, but I think Chevy's done a fantastic job. The Blazer has real presence, particularly around this nose, and particularly if you choose the RS trim that we have here. To be honest, I think it makes the Honda look a bit dull. Nor is it all bark with no bite. Under the hood is a V6 with 308 horsepower and a sophisticated all-wheel drive system. The only caveat for me is the price. Although the Blazer starts at just under 29,000, the one you see here is just north of 50. Now that's £6 more than the Honda and as much as many luxury alternatives. At this price, it better be good. Before my daughter Elyu was born, I actually went to buy a stroller and realised that the one that I wanted wouldn't actually fit in the trunk of the car. So this is more important consumer advice. So should we try and fit this contraption into the Passport?
Let's give it a shot.
It's pretty cool. Look at that, how posh is that? Right, here we go.
Wow, yeah, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing is you can still get a sort of bag alongside it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the greatest strengths of the Passport is it has one of the largest cargo capacities in the class. I will say that, you know, the load and height is a little high, about 3 inches higher than the Blazer, but a little height makes a big difference, especially if you're loading something heavy.
Yeah, you really look like you're going to struggle. What I also like about this is all this side here is lined. There's a lot of really nice attention to detail in the Passport. Should we try the Blazer?
Yeah, let's do that.
See, actually, when you look at the Blazer, this is all plastic. You see it's starting to scratch up straight away.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you know, with the stroller inside, you can definitely see the difference. You've got some intrusions on the inside. It's about 10 cubic feet smaller than the Passport.
Yeah, that's true. You wouldn't fit another big bag beside it like you could easily in the Passport, and day to day, that's going to make a big difference. With our daughters getting restless, it's time to hit the road.
I kind of feel like I'm in a Camaro right now.
I love the way that they've integrated little hints of the coupe into an SUV, particularly around these air vents which twist to adjust the temperature. Biggest problem though is, I think it's style over substance. These air vents are great, but all they tend to do is either freeze your knuckles or freeze your knees, and that's about it. I end up shutting them down. Another pet gripe, talking of the climate control, you can't control the airflow in the back, and I had friends in over the weekend who were complaining for literally hours about the fact that they felt they were constantly getting cold air and couldn't do much about it. And there are lots of details in this vehicle which I think really let it down.
This car is really penny pinching in all the wrong areas. Like you mentioned, the air vents is a big thing, especially if you have kids in the back. Luckily, it seems like these kids are asleep.
There's other little things like the USBs in the center here drive me crazy. I know this is like a really pedantic point, but it's almost like Chevy did a focus group and people say, we need more USB ports. And so they just stuff them in the center of the dashboard. There's no attempt to cover them. There's no reason as to why they're there. If you plug in any sort of cable, they look ridiculous. It drives me mad.
Right, you know, the integration of technology into this cabin is a bit of an issue. It's not that they don't have the features that you want. They give you a USB-C outlet, they give you a USB, they have a wireless charger here. So everything's here, but it's kind of poorly thought out in terms of layout and how you would actually use it.
And you mentioned technology. There is lots of great tech in this vehicle. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, wireless charging. But this screen, I spent many miles trying to adjust this screen. It's mounted vertically, which presumably is to avoid reflection, so it's only partially successful at that, but it always looks a bit odd.
Yeah, and it's really a shame because their Infotainment 3 system is quite good. It's very responsive. Like you said, there's a ton of apps here, so everything is there. It has the right bones, just the execution is poor. One of the things I keep coming back to is the look and feel of the material that they use in here. This car is pushing over 50K, and it just doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't, and it certainly doesn't feel like 50K, but even at $29,000, which is what a Blazer starts at, I'm not sure it's good enough. Quality standards have improved so much recently. Thinking about vehicles like the Mazda CX-5, for example. Chevrolet really needs to pick up their game in this area. It really lets this vehicle down.
So we've spent a lot of time in this car, which has a sportier suspension, but I feel like the ride comfort is actually pretty good, surprisingly good.
It is. I think that's one of the best features about the Blazer. It's even on roads like these, which aren't super smooth. The ride quality is calm, it's relaxed. It's quite an easy car to drive. The only thing that I would say is that you do pay a price. That styling, when you look over your shoulder, there is quite a big blind spot there.
Yeah,
but it does counter that with lots of cameras which help you park and maneuver around. To be honest, I'd sacrifice that for the styling.
So I think that's where you and I differ, because I prefer the natural visibility in the Passport, where you don't need the 360-degree camera system. You can naturally look over your shoulder and see anything that's in your blind spot. So as far as storage goes for knickknacks and everything else that your kids bring along with them, we have a few options here that are pretty decent, but I don't think it's quite packaged as nicely as the Passport.
No, there's probably not as much space overall, but one feature I do love in this vehicle is in this little door pocket here, there's a space designed for an umbrella.
Wonderful.
And as a guy who originally hails from the UK, I love that.
But now you live in California, so...
It's useless.
Useless.
No!
Oh.
This is really annoying. Okay, this is something else that's really grating on me. My knee keeps catching the little temperature control thing, turning on the air conditioning and blowing.
I thought it was actually an automatic, like it was sensing the temperature.
No, it's
it
just
was an advanced
really
system.
annoying.
No, it's just your knee.
It's just my knee.
All right, so now we're in the Honda Passport after jumping out of the Blazer, and right off the bat, I think the material quality in this car just seems a level up from the Blazer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you still got a few hard plastic, but the key thing is they don't look sort of cheap and shiny, and although it's not quite at luxury car standards, it's pretty good.
I mean, everything from the infotainment screen, just having this kind of glossy finish to it, from the controls that, you know, they look pretty classy when they're backlit at night.
Everything just feels very considered in this car. It's just the sort of level of detail, the attention is great, and it just works well. I mean, we've come to expect this from Honda, but everything's kind of where you expect it to be. It's nice that you've got air vents that actually, you know...
It doesn't just blow consistently cold air on your hands.
What I also like about this Passport is the sort of technology feels like it works for you. It's great to have wireless charging for your phone. There's Apple CarPlay or Android Auto if that's what you prefer, and Honda's own system is pretty easy to use, and everything feels pretty quick and responsive.
You know, they have the technology, but I think what Honda does differently from the Blazer is that it's just better integrated. Like you have little flaps here that cover the power outlets when you're not using it, and they're in a good, convenient spot here.
Yeah, the level of thinking, it feels like there's a sort of extra layer of thought that's gone into it.
One thing I will have to nitpick about the Passport is the adaptive driving aids. They're generally pretty good, but the adaptive cruise control doesn't work below 20 miles per hour, whereas in the Blazer it does. So if you're just crawling along in traffic, that is one of the aids that kind of takes the stress out of it. Both our test cars are fitted with a range of electronic gadgets, such as blind spot monitoring, that help you avoid an accident.
The other thing about this, which is hugely important when you've got young kids in the car, is the ride quality is good. Nobody's been thrown around too much.
Right, yeah. I'd say it's probably a tick better than the Blazer, but the Blazer also has slightly larger wheels. That said, yeah, the ride quality is really quite nice in here.
Gearbox is nice, the steering is light, it's certainly not an intimidating car. You can also get great visibility out of it. It feels, to me, I mean, it is a wide car. You feel like you're sat a long way away from it.
I can't elbow you.
But once you get used to the bulk, it is an easy car to place on the road.
Like you said, the visibility, the natural visibility, without having to rely on all the camera systems here, is really quite good. All the windows are squared off. I can look over my shoulder and see everything. So you're not really having to rely on this super comprehensive 360-degree camera to see everything around you.
And unlike the Blazer, Honda's very much set the Passport up as a vehicle that you can take off-road. I mean, all the TV ads have it sort of blasting down dirt tracks, and while it's no Jeep Wrangler, it has got a reasonable amount of off-road ability.
Yeah, you know, that added ground clearance is going to give you slightly better off-road ability, as you say, but it's not a rock crawler. That said, you know, we have a button here that is able to switch between modes, so if you're in the snow, if you're in the mud, it's going to calibrate everything to help you drive through those situations without any issue.
Sounds really geeky, but this is about technology working with you to actually make driving easier and safer. I think both of us recognise that as soon as you have a kid, no matter how old they are, you end up with loads of detritus.
That's a good word for it.
It's a very good word. And what Honda's done is build into this vehicle huge amounts of storage space. There's a big bin here in the centre. There's all sorts of gubbins.
Yeah, everything about this car is about smart packaging.
It feels like it's built for a purpose, and that purpose is taking a family in as much comfort and convenience as possible. I think we like this car.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, the kids seem to be pretty quiet, which I think is a good tribute to the to the Passport's ride quality, and it is pretty refined in here.
It is, or you know, my smooth driving ability might have just put them to sleep.
That could be it, or maybe just start droning on about ride comfort and gearboxes. With our daughters sleeping soundly, well, for once, Jonathan and I take to the Edmonds test track. So in case you're wondering why we bother to bring vehicles like the Blazer and particularly the Passport to the track like this, well, this is a key part of the Edmonds testing process. We're actually here every Monday. And what it allows us to do is to really experience the full repertoire of a car's dynamic ability. So if you are in an extreme situation on the road, we can tell you how we expect it to behave, and we can pick up any vices in the ride or the handling. we think it's an important part of the integrity and authority of the process.
Couldn't agree more. Another interesting aspect that I found with this pairing of cars is that they both offer torque vectoring all-wheel drive. Now what that does is it allows them to send power to individual wheels, which helps steer them through the corner.
Now if that sounds a bit sort of geeky and engineering-y, well, what it effectively does is mean that the car feels more agile and nimble out there in the real world, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're not running lap times today because it could all end in tears, but what do you reckon would be faster? What would you feel that you would be faster in?
I'd definitely say the Blazer, just because it does have the horsepower advantage, and we know that it generates more grip. That said, I'd much rather drive the Passport around here. What about you?
Me too. I think that the Passport just feels like a more consistent car to drive, and yeah, it might ultimately be a nat slower, but it gives you a bit more confidence for me than the Blazer. I can kind of start to feel what's going on better.
Yeah.
So the first thing we have to think about in the Blazer is actually putting it into fun mode. If you drive around normally, it's in front wheel drive, and I think you and I have both done a couple of laps in front wheel drive, and this vehicle really doesn't work around
Not
here.
great. I mean, it affects not only your traction kind of coming out of a corner, but also when you get on the gas, the steering sort of goes wherever it pleases.
Yeah, it's constantly scrabbling for grip. So there's a little knob down here in the center. So you go from two-wheel drive to all-wheel drive, then you have to change it again into sport mode. Now that affects the gearbox, it affects the steering, there's a little bit more resistance, the steering weight's up a little bit more, and in theory this is the fun button.
Yes, yes.
So
it also takes about 10 seconds to do all of that.
It does, slightly irritating.
So I mean, this is obviously, at least from the outside, trying to convey a much more.
Whoa.
There we go. Okay.
Now, it does not take that bump as well as the Honda, does it?
Not quite as well, but we're also, arguably in a slightly sportier vehicle than the Passport. But based off of the exterior design, one might think that this thing is an absolute riot on the handling track.
I don't think it's been built as a car that you would necessarily take to a race circuit for a track day, but I think the exterior styling and certainly all Chevy's marketing points to a car that is going to be fun to drive on a twisting road. For me, it just doesn't. Once again, it just doesn't quite deliver. The steering just feels a little bit artificial. The seats don't give you nearly enough support, so I think both of us feel like we've been thrown around a little bit too much. And although it's pretty quick and it's marginally faster than the Honda in a straight line, it never really feels like it.
I will say that, because we're sitting a little lower and the steering does have a little bit more heft, the Blazer kind of conveys a little bit more confidence on the road that's going to coax somebody to maybe take a turn a little quicker. It's not a ton more, but it's enough, I think, for the average person to say that this does feel like a slightly sportier car than the Passport.
So I think both of us are agreed that instantly on a track like this, the Blazer does feel more sporty than the Passport, but let's not kid ourselves that this is some sort of Camaro in SUV form. It's just not.
It kind of looks the part, but I think if you're going into it thinking that you're going to get a sporty vehicle, that this is going to be as fun to drive as something like the Camaro on a winding road, then I think you're going to be disappointed.
And before everybody writes in the YouTube comments that of course it isn't, it's an SUV, it's not a coupe, well, in today's world, there are SUVs that are genuinely fun to drive. I mean, the luxury market, Porsche Macan, Jaguar F-Pace, but even something like a Mazda CX-5 is frankly just better to drive than this Blazer.
Couldn't agree more.
And for a car with such sporting pretensions, there are a few details that really grate on me. Where, for example, are the paddle shifters to complement the V6? And these seats really lack support. How I'd love a couple of bucket seats from the Camaro. It's like the chassis engineers and the engineering people were in a different briefing to the designers.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. And I think to your point about the sporting pretensions, the fact that you have to activate the all-wheel drive system, whereas with the Pilot it just works automatically. You shouldn't have to select it.
So I think both of us are agreed that if we got the stopwatches out, the Blazer would probably be marginally faster than the Passport. But which would you rather drive?
You know, I'm going to have to shockingly go with the Passport. It's just a much more cohesive package, and it's more satisfying to drive. What about you?
Do you know what? I agree with you, and that's not only a big surprise, but a pretty big disappointment as well. I really had really high hopes for this car.
I did too.
To be honest, there's few vehicles that I've driven in recent times that frustrated me more than the Blazer. I love the way it looks, and on paper it promises so much, but the execution is poor. In many ways it's less than the sum of its parts, and over $50,000, it's also way too expensive. I know lots of people will buy it for its looks alone, and that's absolutely fine, but there are better family options out there, and that's why we're placing it 7th in our rankings for mid-size SUVs.
The Passport really is the more well-rounded car across the board, and at this price point, it feels like a real deal.
It does. In many ways, it's more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, you know, it isn't perfect, but it doesn't try to oversell itself either. In fact, we like it so much, it's now our #1 ranked midsize SUV.
And I think we agreed it's the one that you and I would both buy.
I absolutely would.
Did you buy your own shirt, Alistair?
No, Laurel, if you buy your own Cool Dad t-shirt, it's distinctly uncool.